I'm Cote Pablo.
And I'm Michael Weatherly.
And this is
Off
Duty. Welcome to Off Duty, an NCIS rewatch podcast. This week on the show, we're talking Season 3, Episode 19, Iced. A boy playing on a frozen pond sees the body of a man below the surface. Gibbs and company investigate and find 3 more bodies. The first was a Marine. The others were gang members. The team figure it out, and Gibbs provides a solution. This is Season 3, Episode 19, Iced. And we have a very special guest by the name of Shane Brennan.
Now, you know how we do these flashbacks every episode?
Yes.
When I was reviewing this, I got so excited to talk to you about this.
Okay, go ahead. Talk to me about it.
At this time of the episode's release, it was April 11th, 2006. The bodies of 8 members of the infamous Bandidos biker group were found by a resident in a cornfield in southwest Ontario, Canada. The incident was considered a cleansing of the gang's inner circle, and that just so happened to happen on the date that this episode aired, which is about a gang.
Yeah, which is crazy.
How about like the synchronicity and that?
But can you tell me what the name of the gang biker group was called?
Bandidos.
Oh my God.
Bandidos.
I was like, when you said that, I was like, he's been polishing
Bandidos.
his Espanol.
Well, the musician Proof from Eminem's hip-hop group D12 was shot and killed in a Detroit nightclub. The president of Iran announced that Iran has successfully enriched uranium. A man disfigured in a bear attack, sorry, I should have told you to put on your earmuffs, becomes the first in China to have a face transplant.
Oh my God. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because for a long time,
I had one.
Well, you look great.
Today's episode is called Iced, and here's what's happened in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
2 kids find a corpse in a frozen pond, and then we go and we find a lot more corpses in that pond.
Yes, we do. We do. Tony and Ziva bully McGee for his feminine skin cream. Do you think I'm bullying him? I don't think I'm bullying him at all. I actually think I'm a spectator, and I'm kind of going in and out, and I'm kind of like enjoying the conversation between you, and I'm laughing. I'm not... In fact, at times I kind of encourage McGee, and I'm like, look.
Bullying and hazing, there's an envy.
You just set off gaydar across the entire Atlantic seaboard. Tony, I am not gay. This isn't about orientation. This is about image.
So now your image is homopubic?
And I found this really interesting because in an earlier episode in this season, DiNozzo makes fun of McGee for wearing a turtleneck. And in this episode...
He's wearing a turtleneck.
He's wearing McGee's turtleneck.
So proudly wearing a turtleneck and
right,
that jacket.
But there's a part of Tony, unconsciously, I think, that loves how smart McGee is, how kind of easy he is with things like skin hygiene and how well he packs his lunch and how he thinks ahead. Because McGee doesn't have ADHD, and Anthony DiNozzo is a poster child for that, particular mindset. And so I feel like the hazing and this stuff, while it's never okay in a workplace environment, we are not making a documentary. We're making a show about how people screw up sometimes and how human we can all be. And
because of that, I think McGee questions, which takes us to the next point. McGee questions his manliness or lack thereof. I think McGee is a perfectly beautiful man, and
when he's got his sunglasses at the end, and he's being macho in his own McGee kind of way.
Yeah.
You can keep those.
He goes full circle. He's like, I think he has to be teased to kind of go like, man, I'm fine the way I am. Like, I'm okay. Like, I don't need to play a character so I can make that DiNozzo dude happy,
I grew up with a phrase in my life that was never teased, never loved.
Oh, yeah.
And that...
that's a very family thing. Like, who doesn't do that in a family thing?
Right.
You know, I mean, I was teased. My brother was teased. Like, we all had nicknames for each other, you know.
Cole la poo-poo?
No. Oh, that's you. That's your name for me.
Okay.
Hey, Cherie, what do you remember from shooting this episode? All I remember, and this is something we'll talk about later, is how freaking cold that night was, remember? And I was coming from New York. You know what I mean? I was coming all the way from New York with the brutal winters and that wind chill factor and the winds kind of like cutting your face. And this was at another level.
So do you remember the moment where Gibbs strokes Tony's neck?
You expecting an attaboy? I thought it would be nice. Attaboy.
Like he was going to slap my head, but then...
And then he goes like this.
There's a lot of men touching men in this episode. So, you know, while you might reflexively think like, this episode says, you know, da-da-da-da. It's like, look closer at this episode and you will see that it's answering a lot of the questions you might have about what's inappropriate and appropriate. All of our guests are important. All of our guests are critical to the life blood of this show. But Shane Brennan may be the grout holding a lot of these tiles together. This is a man responsible for well over 500 episodes of the series itself. This is a man who came in at a really important moment in season 3, right when another person came in named Cole la Pablo. And so you guys both came in around the same time and in totally amazing style and fashion had a huge impact on this world. Executive producer, creator Shane Brennan from the world of NCIS, the man who made a lot of Mothership and then went on to create NCIS Los Angeles. And then because he's Australian, now we have something called NCIS Sydney.
Yes, we do. We have not seen Mr. Brennan in quite a long time. And let's get after it. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's lasso this guy. Bring him in.
Shane Brennan. Holy crap. I'd forgotten that you're calling us all the way from...
Woolloomooloo?
Where are you right now? It's nighttime.
I'm in Melbourne, the capital of the world.
I have yet to go to this country, and I hear it's just so beautiful.
You must. Michael's been.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Michael has relationships there. I mean, he's formed some good friendships.
He has indeed.
I do love that place. And it has been a tick of the talk of the clock, Sir Brennan, Sir Shane, since we spoke last. How are you?
I'm really well. It's been like 10 years. What the fuck happened?
Time keeps on slipping. With the origin of you coming in, Don Bellisario doing this crazy show, you had been on CSI Miami for a moment.
Look, it was a pretty interesting story in that I arrived in 2003. I got a gig on CSI Miami. I lasted a year. I got fired because I was number 2, shared number 2's position on the shows, sort of deputy showrunner. And I didn't want the job. I just wanted a job. I didn't want that job. But I think because I had so much writing experience, the Australian system means you write everything. I was writing 18, 20 hours of TV a year in all genres, sitcoms, drama, you name it, kids shows. So I arrived with 25 years experience, probably 500 hours of credits. And I scared the crap out of people because, you know, they thought I could do everything. I had no production experience. We used to just write. I was just a writer. I moved to a little show called Summerland with Laurie Loughlin. Hi, Laurie. It got cancelled. And then I moved to One Tree Hill to be number 2 for Mark Schwann. And Mark had the same sorts of issues with me. He was a new showrunner, and they wanted someone with a bit of experience, not knowing, of course, that I had none as a showrunner. And my agent had kept saying each year, look, I know they're looking for writers on NCIS. And then you go, no, a lot of writers, too hard. A lot of writers get fired off NCIS. It's been a hard show. And eventually I saw Don. We got on Great, just straight away. He has an Australian wife.
Yeah, I think that I was going to say that connection really did come in handy.
Yeah, it did come in handy. And I think I arrived there and, having spent all of that time writing, 25 years of writing all of these genre shows, I got onto that show and within about, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks, I thought, I've landed. Everything I've done, all of the experience I have, all of the things I love to write, they're all in this show. And I was, I felt that this was going to work.
And, that's an interesting thing that you're touching on. I think that I felt that as well, because I felt like when I was doing James Cameron's Dark Angel, I had to talk in this voice. I mean, I felt that the genre required me to be a certain way. I think on CSI Miami, for instance, there was a kind of genre element about a crime show, procedural, CSI. People were very self-serious. And
it
then
was
when
forensic. It was really forensic, both style and
when you get into, you, speaking of Dark Angel, worked on a show called Flipper with Jessica Alba back in the 90s. So you and I have both worked with Jessica. And
dolphins.
But the idea that you're able to accommodate the voices of Polly Perrette, who has got a kind of, she's really handy in a sitcom element, but she's also great in a kind of almost famous, gritty film, feeling, or Cody DePablo, who's coming from stage theater background, and Mark Harmon, who's doing.
Yeah, that's a really good thing you're heading towards. How was it for you to come into a show that was already established, and were you able to hear these voices pretty quickly?
It's a really interesting question. Look, as an old hand, as a writer with that much experience, the first thing I did was read all of Don's scripts, because what you want to deliver to the showrunner is something that he's familiar with. What I wanted to give him was my first script. I wanted to give it to him so he's like, hey, I could have written this,
Yeah.
This is me. I wanted him to relax about me. But in reading all of his scripts and watching those episodes, that's how you get the voices. Now, that gives you the broad structure of the show, a really good thumbnail of the characters. You still have to find those voices. And as a writer, what we do, or the way I do it, I put, Tony and Ziva in a room and sit quietly in the corner and say, this is what's happening, get talking. And all I do is write down what you guys say. And that's what you want to do as a writer. You want to be just in the corner, letting these guys go. So when you write something, when those characters say something funny, I can be writing and I'll laugh out loud because you guys have just had a real fantastic exchange and I've written it down. It's not me saying it. I hear voices. That's the way you get into the show. That's the way you explore the characters. And so eventually what happens is you go, no, Ziva wouldn't say that. Ziva, what are you doing? And suddenly you go, oh no, she's taking me down a road. Let's just go down there. Let's follow her and see where it takes us, where it takes the scene. And I remember the first episode I wrote was All Men Are Liars. It's called Faking It.
I guess it's not a who, it's more of an it.
Who's in this case agent?
What time is it in Mexico right now?
David loved the episode because it was very forensic. Guy gets shot, pukes up the bullet, and you guys had to go and find the bullet because it was he said it added a new definition to projectile vomiting because the projectile was in the vomit. When I read that episode and I gave it to Don, that was my first episode. And so, okay, as much as I was confident in the episode, every time we write something, we pull our pants down. It's like, is this any good? Doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. It's same for you guys. Your performance is it good enough? Did I go too far? Help me, director. That's the way. Artists do this. If you don't feel that it's rubbish, that it's crap, then you haven't tried hard enough at it. You're becoming too confident with it. So when I gave Don that script, I was nervous about how he was going to react. And the morning after I'd given it to him, I stepped out of the elevator, very long corridor at Gower Studios where we were based at that point. And I stepped out of the elevator, turned into the corridor, quite a long corridor. Don's comes around the corner of that corridor and he sees me and he stares at me and I'm like, oh crap. And then he went, I knew an Aussie could do it. He put his arms out and I thought,
because by the way, that's a lot to get from Don. Like he's not a very,
Don and I got on really well. We understood each other because I totally respected him as a writer and he respected me as a writer. And, it's kind of weird for anyone outside that writing bubble, but it doesn't matter how big, how important, how famous, how scary someone can be, and Don could be scary for people. Once you get into the zone of writing, when you start talking about writing and when you're writing and you're struggling with the same lines and the same issues, the same plot points, how are we going to do this? You're in the trench together. So you bond. There's a great respect. Had that respect for Don all the way through.
And how did you start as a writer? Like, can you talk to us a little bit about the origins of Shane Brennan? Like, how did you stumble upon this thing? Were you always like, you know what, I'm going to be a writer? Or were like, you know what, I think I could be this? Or was there anything along the way that sort of, you watched the TV show, for example, we've had guests here and they're like, I had a quintessential moment. I watched this movie and I knew from then on, that's what I needed to do. Did you have that moment at all?
I saw a movie called The Great Escape with a guy called David McCallum.
Yes.
And I told David this and he dug up a photo and he autographed it for me. And he said, my dear fellow, I'm so sorry. It's the only photo I have from the movie. But, I was about 8 when I saw that movie, and that had a massive impact. Massive, wide, big CinemaScope screen. It was just, stunning. So when I was 11, I wrote a play. I started writing short stories. I became a journalist, a newspaper journalist, and then a radio and television journalist. So I had a bit of exposure to the medium in terms of the visual side of it. But I always wanted to be a writer. I think I wrote a spec feature film, which never got picked up. It got optioned a few times, but it became a sample. And then I started writing TV in Australia. And I was writing it by the time when I was 22. I'd written like 100 episodes of TV when I was like 26.
Which is just the best to have that I started with soap operas, and it didn't matter if you were great the day before or if you sucked the day before, because today's today and we got to make more. And I have often said to people as I get ready to go to set, let's make the television. Let's go make the television. The television doesn't care whether you're sick or healthy, happy or sad, divorced or married. It needs you to make more television. For our faithful listeners and viewers of this podcast, NCIS is a golden television show. And you wrote an episode, and I'll never forget you even talking to me about it in season 5. And you were describing the opening of a show that came to be known as Requiem.
Oh my God, I love that show, and it's such a great opening.
Well, Shane started talking about that show, and you really you wanted to see something. And so this goes to your creativity and to that sort of thing that you learned how to tap into, not just having the craft and the being a craftsman who knows how to shape a story and find the lead and everything, but also this creative impulse. You want to see something.
This is something that, by the way, Michael, you and I just got back from a little press tour, and you've talked about that moment as being like such an important moment for you as an actor, for Tony DiNozzo, but also you, Michael, you geeked out on that moment because it gave you that sort of action star thing that I think you were like, wow, like I get to do something that I haven't done before. And you were so excited about that, and you were so proud of that moment. And it's I'm so glad you bring it up because it's like, shooting it with it. And it's a really cool
Now
opening.
I want to hear the creative brain. Although now Shane's going to go, I don't really remember that episode.
Well, that's probably my favorite episode in the whole, for my time there. In terms of writing, there are other great episodes, that we made that I just had so much time and energy putting into editing. And I loved a lot of the episodes. That particular one I wrote, my favorite. And what I thought was, it was time that basically DiNozzo grew a pair. I mean, you hadn't been that sort of action hero. You hadn't done that sort of big moment. And I thought, well, let's explore this. My big fear, Michael, was that you were going to say, I can't swim. I have a fear of the water. And it was the same with Mark, and Mark did all of his own stunts. You did all of your own stunts. Cameron Goodman, who played Maddie in that episode, she was in the water too. I mean, it was absolutely perfect. Tony Warmby as director. I mean, so many things came together. And I think one of the big things that that episode did, it said to the crew, look what we can do. We've been doing this, but we can actually do this, because it was an action-heavy sequence. And
they were excited. Do you remember how excited they were? I mean, they talked about that for a long time. And that's a thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. You really are working with a company of people. You're working with a group of people. And if it starts from the top, that level of excitement, it trickles down and every single person then starts doing their part in such an organic, creative, and heightened way. And then you get something kind of special. And then the other thing I wanted to say about that moment is you could put DiNozzo in a box and you could say, oh yeah, he's, the quintessential frat guy who's always sort of like, the default is, oh, I'm going to hit on a girl and I'm going to do this and you do that. But at the end of the day, if he's not a good agent, there's no point of him being there on NCIS and being, the number 2 and being Gibbs's guy. And in that moment, you really clearly see his strength. He is when he has to be, and he can put all of that like defense mechanism away, and which is the comedy and where we get so much of the fun and where we get so much of that. He gets to take that off, and then he gets to show us not only is he good, but he's really, really good at what he does. And he can be this sort of like action figure. And then what he does is that he deflects, right? He sort of pokes fun at himself, and then he reverts back to like the old frat boy guy. But if he didn't have those moments, there is no 3-dimensional character. And that's what makes the character so special, so lovable, and why, he stands in this passage of time.
He was a badass in that episode.
Yeah.
I mean, running, shooting guys, diving into the water. It was pure action. But there was that quintessential moment where you're pumping on Gibbs's chest, and you're saying, don't make me kiss you, boss.
Don't do this to me, boss. Come on, don't do this to me. Don't make me kiss you, boss.
Yeah. Which I remember writing that scene, and I'm thinking, he's got to say something. Here's Gibbs. What are you going to say? DiNozzo, say something. And it's like, don't make me kiss you. Oh, fuck, I'm going to have to kiss you. And,
the kiss
there was
of
so
life.
much, the kiss of life. Look, the funny thing about that episode, here's a little inside story. We made that episode. We would get the promos for each episode about a week before, because they'd air at the end of this show before. And we'd usually get them with about 24 hours notice, and they'd just say, here's the promo, just, could you tick it off? And they sent the promo through to that episode. Did you ever see it? Did you ever see the promo that CBS
God, I don't remember the
did?
promo. I remember the episode.
I'm remembering this story as you're telling it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they send the promo through, and it's sepia. They've got an old-fashioned sepia frame with lacework around it, and the promo was, someone from Gibbs's past comes back to talk about remind him of the daughter he's lost. And there were violins playing, and it was like, I looked at them and went, what this is, they have missed the mark, And so I got Roy Poole was the editor on that episode. And I said to Roy, stop what you're doing. We're going to cut a promo. So we cut the promo with just the opening, selecting pitch, fading to black, pulling up another bit, without anything else. And just at the end, we said, next Tuesday, sort of thing. And I sent it back to them. And I waited for the explosion. I waited like, what the fuck? They had a whole department who cut promos. I mean, that was their job. How dare you send, that's what I'm waiting for. And I get a phone call and they say, we are so sorry. We totally missed this opportunity. This is the best promo we've ever done, except we haven't done it. And so what the promo ended up being was just the opening sequence where you give everything away, in effect. But it is so compelling that I knew the audience would say, I've got to watch that episode.
And it's one that people watch again and again and again because of the nonlinear presentation of the story. The time frame is cut up, so you kind of have to watch it again anyway. Just not only is it fantastic and visually, it is like a great chocolate chip cookie, a great episode of NCIS. You cannot have just one.
we added 2 million viewers to that show. From the show before, that next week, that promo got us 2 million viewers. The following week, we dropped about 750,000 of those, but we picked up about 1.25 million extra viewers off the back of Requiem.
Shane, when did you start putting together the idea of LA? When did you start sort of like thinking like, oh, this is what I want to do next? And because this was you sort of branching out and creating your own thing. When did that happen?
Michael can see I've got a very sly sort of smirk on my face here. It's a great question.
I'm like, why are you smirking? That's just like a very honest question, and I'd like to know.
It is well, I'm going to tell you something that not many people know. I've told a few people this story, so now everyone's going to know it. So I'm with the head of CBS Studio, David Staff. We're going to pitch a show to Nina Tastler, who runs the network. It's a show that one of mine. So I've been working on NCIS. I've got a show I want to make that's not NCIS. It's not anything to do with that. It's another idea of mine. And under my deal, I was allowed to do that. And I pitched it to David. David liked the show and said, okay, let's go and talk to Nina about this show and see if we can get a pilot made of it. So we go to Nina's office and we're in the foyer at the network. And David's on his BlackBerry, which kind of gives you an idea where it was. Sure. He's on his BlackBerry. And on the screen in the foyer is an episode of NCIS playing from the previous season. And I'm standing there and I sort of watched this episode and I glanced across at David and said, that's one of the best episodes we made last season. And David sort of glanced up and looked at the screen, then he looked at me and said, think we could do a sequel? And I said, yeah, I've got a spin-off. And he said, what? And he literally dropped his back. He's like, what? You've got a spin-off? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, tell me about it. I said, well, no. He said, but tell Nina. We'll go in together and just tell Nina and I'll listen and I'll keep nodding. I said, no, David, I'm here to pitch this other show. I can't pitch the spin-off. It's not in my head. It's not fair. And he said, oh, okay. And he sat there for a minute. He said, I've got to go and see someone. So he gets up, goes in, obviously goes to see Nina, comes back out. We go in. I'm taking him to see Nina. Nina sits there and I pitched this other show I've got. And she nods and smiles and she says, oh, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. And we get to the end of the pitch and she says, oh, well, David tells me you've got a spin-off of NCIS. And I said, yeah, I have. But, she said, could you tell me? I said, well, I can, but, I don't think it's fair. I need to get it into my head again. I've come in.
So one question, was this an actual, had you thought this through or was it just like an immediate, oh crap, I can latch onto this and they'll like this and I can run with this. Was it like sort of?
Hence the smirk. I didn't have a spin-off.
Right.
I had nothing.
Right. Got it.
I had that much. I had 0% of zero. And so Nina said, well, just tell me what it's about. And I looked at her and a word popped out of my head. Undercover. She said, I love Undercover. And she said, I want to hear it tomorrow. I said, okay, 3:00 tomorrow. I went home, I sat down, looked at my computer and wrote. And that night, I
remember your title.
The pitch.
Red.
Legend.
Wasn't it Red?
No, that was Legend.
It was Legend.
Oh, Legend.
Because
Absolutely.
when you're undercover, you have a legend. You have a story, a backstory. It's called a legend.
Yeah,
so
I remember you talking about this, and it was also around the time of the strike.
Yeah.
We were either going into or coming out of it.
Coming out of the strike, I think. No, that was
it was before. Yeah, I think it was season 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it wonderful that you can sit here and try to think which year it was and which show, and it's still on the air?
No, I mean, it's crazy.
Isn't it
and
crazy?
by the way, Michael and I were just in Monaco celebrating the 1,000th episode of the NCIS franchise. And, we've been now talking for a couple of months with, Danny Rua, Eric Christian Olsen. I mean, we've had so many wonderful people, Brian Dietz and, Joe Spano, Dennis Smith. We've had a lot of people. And, so to sit here and sort of talk to you about like the origins of NCIS LA and what that turned into, because how long was that run? I mean, that was 14 years.
343 episodes. Like the Mothership, but we had a cast who got on really well. They loved their job. We had a crew who no one left. We didn't have people leave NCIS LA. People didn't leave NCIS. That whole family thing is very true. When a show is working and everyone loves doing the show and there's a lot of respect and it's creatively, fulfilling, people stay, and that's how shows last.
We had Echo and we had Danny Rua, and man, like those guys had a good time and they had their own stories and they were laughing and they had it. And it's really funny because we were able to sort of like compare things. And
did Daniela tell you about her audition?
She actually, did we talk about the audition, Shane?
No.
Because I feel like
she said it from New York, and look, we were getting, I guess, pretty much the way NCIS grew out of JAG as a backdoor pilot in effect. You're making 22 episodes of a show, and suddenly
24,
or 24, as we did. It's like, okay, you make a pilot, but it's got to be within the context of those 24, and the budget's not as much as you get if you're making a standalone pilot, and all of the pressures of shows coming before and shows in post and shows coming after. So we didn't have a big amount of time, and casting the show was pretty critical and tight. And we were having trouble finding the right person for Kenzie. And we got an audition, and Susan Bluestein, who was the casting director, came. She said, look, we've got this. And she showed me this video, which was not much bigger than a postage stamp, and it was shot really badly, but there was just something about it. And I said, we can't say yes on this audition because the studio are going to say no. Everyone's going to say no. I said, stick her on a plane, bring her out here. And so we literally phoned her and said, you're getting on a plane, you're coming out now. And she flew out, and the moment she arrived and she walked into the room, straight away, it was just one of those things, it clicked. Yeah. As a writer, that's what you want. You write the script, you put it in front of the actors and you say, elevate this, lift it off the page, turn it into something that's going to surprise me because, I've written it, I've heard the voices, give me something. And when you do that, and if you've hit certain markers, I guess, in the story or in the character arc or in the moment, a good actor is going to grab that and find something special in it. That
casting is so important. And when you were doing LA and you got Linda Hunt and you had certain people, and then what happens, which is just the cruel bottom line truth of all of it is, even Real Madrid is going to have to take somebody off the team, or when Beckham was, taken off the starting team, and because sometimes it's not good for the team, because when you create your pitch, when you create the show, Cody and I have just kind of been going through this right now as the casting is gelling for NCIS, Tony and Ziva, that show is not just about Tony and Ziva. It's about this world that we live in, and it's populated, and it has to be populated by actors who can do exactly what you were saying. They are more than the sum of their parts. They elevate everything to this three-dimensional place where you can suddenly, as an audience, you can project yourself into the world. You see yourself and you're surprised and all of those things. And that alchemy, right? I mean, isn't it just the most impossible thing?
You mentioned NCIS Red. It didn't work. We didn't have, we had a show that would work, that would deliver lots and lots of episodes, but we couldn't get the chemistry to work. We didn't have the time that we needed to cast it. And finding the right chemistry was really hard in that time frame. So it's not hit and miss in that sense. It can be heartbreaking because you spend so much time getting to that place, and everyone involved is trying to deliver their absolute best, but sometimes it just doesn't do it.
Well, it's like dating. You could be with like the perfect person or date somebody who's like everything on paper, but there's just that thing where you're like, well, it's just missing. That spark is just missing. Yeah. It's the same thing. I wanted to ask you something. So you said you went back after 14 years. Was that after LA was over, or did you go back a little before?
No, I went back before. Scott Gemmell was the number 2 on the show. And yeah, the sad truth is that when you decide to leave a show and you put someone else in charge, you need to disappear. You can't be hanging around looking over their shoulder. The cast and the crew need to know that this guy's now the boss. Shane Brennan can't be there, because if Shane's available and they don't like what Scott's doing, they're going to contact Shane, and then it's going to undermine showrunners. So when I said goodbye...
Did that decision come about because you were like, I need to go home? Was it like very much like I need to go home decision?
Yeah, it was. I'd reached that point. I had a production company. I had a couple of other things I was trying to get up. If they don't want to do this stuff, that's fine. I want to go home. I want to go back to my family. I've got novels I want to write, movies, plays. I've got a bunch of other things.
And how was this is a question that usually, we ask people that have been in the business for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what, I need to unplug. I need to go back to the source. I need to just kind of go find myself and lick my wounds, be with my wife, be with my kids. How was that? Please walk me into what that love bomb was. Because, you were away for a long time and you were chasing dreams and you did it at a very high level and you were quite successful. So how was it to sort of unplug from that, if you ever truly did? And how was it to sort of go back to the family, to being the family guy? I want to know that guy. I want to know that guy.
I'd never owned a house in LA. I always rented. I always had a visa. I didn't get a green card. So I had one foot out the door. My agent used to say to CBS, don't piss him off. He has a return flight to Australia and he carries his passport in his back pocket. Just don't piss him off. It was a really good negotiating tactic. But it was true. I was torn. And when I made that decision, one of the things that happens when I was given the show with Don's blessing when he left. And one of the things that I guess it was the strike that did it, when we went on strike the following year, I think, you realize how many people rely on your ability to keep this ship sailing. And it's not anything anyone warned you about, but if you don't do a good job, if you fuck it up, a lot of people are out of work. Mm-hmm. So there's an added responsibility about, the 250 people who work on a show, and it's a responsibility that sort of weighs you down. So when LA came along, that burden of security for everyone. It took about 6 years, I guess, before I felt this show's going to be okay. This show's going to run for maybe 10, 12 years. On NCIS, I knew that was going to happen at the season finale of season 5, Judgment Day Part 1 and 2.
Right, where director Shepard is killed, right?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right. Yes.
Tony.
I knew NCIS was in for a long run because that show aired, the finale for that season aired on the East Coast it finished airing as I was getting on a plane in LA to fly back to Australia for the hiatus. And CBS Publicity phoned me in the lounge room at LAX and said, the show's just finished airing on the East Coast and NCIS, the fan forum is it's exploded. There have been 10,000 comments already and they hate you. You've just fired everyone. The new director's come in and fired everyone. What are you doing to the show? And I said, no, it'll be fine. So I fly for 15 hours. I get off the plane in Melbourne. I turn on my phone, a dozen calls from publicity. I phone them back. There are now 50,000 comments and everyone is freaking out. You're going to have to put out a statement. And I thought, 50,000 people just watched an hour of TV and were so involved, engaged in it, that they actually went on a forum and wrote something. Even if it was, we hate you, what are you doing to our show? They were engaged. And I knew at that point, this show's going to go forever. I mean, because I knew what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I was teasing everyone. I was trying to get them to get angry and to come back. And our numbers kept going up afterwards, but they all came back to see what was going to happen. And, that's what you did at the end of the show. So I knew at that point, I knew the show was going to be safe. I didn't think for 22 seasons. I was thinking, it'll probably run for another 10 years. And the same with LA. So when that decision was made, when you reach a point where you think, you know what, the show has served these people well, it's going to continue serving them. Everyone loves doing their job. It can go another 5, 10 years. They don't need me now. It's time for someone fresh to come in. It's going to be a different show, but the audience won't notice because these are good people. They know how to transition. It's the same with Gary. God rest his soul. When Gary took over from me on NCIS, the question from the studio was, it's going to be different. And I said, yeah, it's going to be different. But, Gary's clever. The cast are not going to be different. The stories will have a slightly warmer, emotional edge to them. It's probably what it needs about now, And the same with Scott. Scott changed the show. It's what happens. It breathes new life into the show. So leaving was, in that sense, it was my time to go. And going home to the family and to the grandkids and to another life, I look back incredibly proudly of what I did on NCIS and on LA.
Are you a happy man back home right now, being
very
surrounded by family and grandkids and your children? Is that like a really good chapter for Shane Brennan right now? Not to say that you're not focusing on other creative things. I'm sure you are, but is this part a fulfilling one?
I got home. My daughter went to work with the UN in New York. My son went to work with the World Health Organization in Geneva. My other son moved interstate. It's like, Dad's home. Hello.
Welcome, Dad. Bye.
Bye. We're off. So, but no, we see each other often. We were in Geneva a couple of weeks ago with the grandkids. We have grandkids down in Tasmania, southern part of Australia. Our daughter comes home. She's in Tbilisi in Georgia at the moment. So working with the UN. We see the family frequently. Do a lot of traveling.
Well, that's good.
That is a beautiful thing.
This has been such a treat.
All those 10,000 people, 50,000 people that wrote those letters, I guarantee you are watching this podcast, listening to this podcast. So we all applaud you, Shane Brennan.
Absolutely.
What a run.
No, we applaud the fans.
But what a run. You had a great run.
And every success to you too.
Thank you so much.
With the new show. I think it's going to be fabulous.
Well,
thank you for being a part of this. I know it's late for you, so we're just going to send you off into your little sleepy land.
Lots of love. Lots of love, Mr. Shane Brennan.
Yes.
And
Thank
it's
you.
great to
Wonderful
see your
to see
smiling
you.
face. All right.
Yeah.
I don't think we had seen Mr. Brennan in a long time.
No, that was really something. I mean, you know, I kept having all of these memories. I remember being at Franklin Canyon when all of us got into Mark's Silver Airstream trailer and we had like a cast meeting about, I don't know, whatever the drama was that we were all convinced was the most important thing in the world, which at the time, you know, that was our life. It was a majority of the hours spent awake in our lives was making episodes of NCIS. Shane was there starting season 3 and 4. He took over season 5, 6. We did the embedded spinoff for LA. Season 7 was the launch of LA while he was running both shows.
Wow.
Shane Brennan was there at a real nexus point in the show. And I think you can safely...
What a crazy thing for him to just say, oh, yeah, no, I've got a spinoff. It's like it's in my back pocket. Like, it's the classic story of like, you know, something opens and you just go in. Like you see an opening and you just take it.
Right.
It's very, you know, it's what a shrewd thing. Like, and also going home and being able to like, okay, well, I need to now come up with a spinoff that, you know, it's going to go, you know, in a way it's going to go if you're going to give these guys another NCIS when it was the #1 show at that time. Like, who's not going to go for that? Like, you're going to give me a spinoff of the thing that keeps giving, you know?
That's a creativity, but also the lack of rigidity, the lack of the need to forever control something. He said twice in that interview, he handed off the show to Gimmel, he handed off the show to Glassberg. I'm sure there were other forces, you know, Harmon was in there, and there, you know, but he's extremely aware that everything is limited, has a time, has a life. Yeah. And when things have a life, it means a beginning and a middle and an end, like a story.
My favorite thing was when he used to tell us from the beginning, hey, you know, I'm going to be here for a couple of years and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to work my butt off, and then I'm going to go back home. And I was like, okay, we'll see about that. And you know what? He did it. And when he did it, I was like, oh, he did it. Game time. And this one is called Cartel Questionnaire. Go, take it on.
The cartel plays a central part of the plot in this episode, a popular source of inspiration for many TV shows and films. In this game, Cody, you and I will choose between a real and a totally made-up drug lord and guess which is the real one. I'll ask you, you're going to know. Junior Capsula or Pin Pin Pula? Which one is the real drug lord?
Oh, Pin Pin Pula. No. Wait 1 second. No, I just had.
Hello? They found your brain. It was rolling. You must have. Hello?
You know,
they found your brain.
No. You know what just happened?
Okay.
I had a moment. No, wait, listen. We've been talking about people. We've been talking about Pin Pin Pula for 25 episodes, and all I knew is I drew a blank, and the only name I recognized was Pin Pin Pula.
Okay. Which one is real? Which one's fake? The Dapper Don or the Suave Signor?
I don't know. I answered the first one.
I'm going to say the Dapper Don is the real one. What do we say in my ear? The Dapper Don. I like that. You want to ask the next one?
Yeah. Highway Hank Bezer or Freeway Rick Ross?
Well, I just watched Freeway Rick Ross on Joe Rogan, so it's got to be the other guy.
Yeah, it's got to be Highway Hank Bezer.
Oh, mother trucker. Shut the front door.
The godmother of cocaine or the godfather of crack? Godmother of cocaine. And I do believe that is Griselda Blanco.
Played that.
Griselda Blanco, not Sofia Vergara. Get it together.
I don't know. I've got some fan questions that I want to review with you. Can I jump into a fan question with you?
Yes, please. Yes,
okay.
Please.
Now, I'm going to put on my optical illusion glasses here. Karen in Albany, New York. Were all the tattoos on the cartel guys fake? If so, who designed those and how were they applied? Well, Joe Haley probably applied some of them, and then maybe another backup team of makeup artists. I bet.
But you know what? Maybe they hired some people with real tattoos.
Okay, here's why I don't. Why I don't think so. I don't think so, because when you film a tattoo, there's a copyright infringement because the artist who made the tattoo. Yes, you have to make like fake ones. Yeah. So anyway, that was a good question. That was
I didn't know that at all. Hey, you just taught me something. So this is Bridget from Arlington, Texas. The scene where you mock Proby for his feminine skincare cream was definitely interesting to see through the lens of 2024. What did you guys think of rewatching that scene? Also, who had the best skin on the NCIS set? You know, this is something that jumped at me as I was watching this. I was like, holy crap. Too. In today's climate, this would be like totally wrong. And when we were shooting it, I think maybe we're like, what? But, you know, we went with it because obviously, you know, we're actors and, you know, we're like, okay, let's push the envelope a little. How did you feel about that? How did you feel about the jokes and, you know? And,
first of all, Pauly Perrette's got the best skin, and then you have the second best skin. But I really think Pauly Perrette's skin is made out of something from alien technology. And then, but I will say this.
David McCallum. Are you kidding me? So, David McCallum.
So the masculinity and the sexual orientation and the you know, the words chosen to, you know, I don't think, I think what it was meant to do then, even through the lens of now, it's still achieved, which is when you're telling a story, it's offensive to me when a story is told and every character is odorless and every character has a flawless perception of their place in society that's totally in step. What I like is that DiNozzo comes from a place where he sees the world from this place. He's like, well, you don't want to be that because you want to be this. And the way to be this is that
you want to fit in. You want to be perceived as something. You want to be.
But it doesn't mean he's right. And it doesn't mean that we have that he is an example for all the audience and all the kids that watch NCIS. He's not Superman. He's a guy who's wrong about a lot. And in this particular sense, what I found interesting is that McGee is going, Tony, I don't, you know, so he's speaking more to that sense of like, this makes me uncomfortable. And then
but what it does also, which is really funny and where we find the comedy, is we actually start seeing McGee try to make real efforts to be this kind of like, well, how can I change my persona and how can I sort of betray myself in the process? And that's what builds this comedy thing. And I think that way it was effective.
When I'm rubbing his chin, and this is for the audience to dig into this episode, but when I'm rubbing his chin and I say it, and then I get a head slap because I'm touching another coworker on their face, and I say he feels like a little bunny rabbit. He's like a little soft little bunny rabbit.
Yeah.
But after I take my finger away, I played a beat and they kept it in the shot.
Would you go to yours?
But I also am confused about how I feel about touching another man's face. Like I felt, and I remember doing this on purpose, feeling like DiNozzo doesn't process because he's in the moment, but he has an awareness that it did feel good touching another man's face. Does that make me question my sexuality? And I wanted that to be there because I always have felt about Tony DiNozzo that he, there's a lot of posturing and there's a lot of, he's trying to present himself as something and he's not entirely sure-footed in all of it. And I think you can feel when we talked about that Requiem episode.
But by the way, you're also talking about season 3. You're talking about a very early DiNozzo. You're talking about a very young DiNozzo, very sort of like, you know, how the character also transitions and how he grows and all of that from that season to, let's say, the last season we see you. It's a massive arc. I mean, there is obviously some human growth in there, some spiritual stuff shifting. you know?
Yes, but I also felt that when you're playing a runner, as they call it, or a B story or a line which is about masculinity and which is about fronting and about image. And, you have these gang members who are all
fronting.
And they're, but when one of them is found out not to be true, and we can talk about this for a second, the end of that episode, when Gibbs just leaves him on the street.
Semper Fi.
Goodbye, Cesar.
Yeah.
And basically executes him. He knows what's going to happen. And we're all in the squad room at the end going, did boss just totally allow that guy? Again, we've talked about this a lot this year.
But
it's
that
that gray house that Gibbs lives in.
It's that gray world where there is a little bit of that. You want to be an animal in the jungle, well, then survive in the jungle. And then he just kind of drops you in the middle of the jungle and he goes, you want to be that guy? Show me. And then it's a tough lesson, obviously, because it's a life or death lesson. But at that moment, Gibbs is very clear of what he's going to do, which is, it's what makes Gibbs the man that at times I go, holy crap, man, that's tough. But it's his own set of values, and that's what makes the character interesting.
It's an episode that's all about what's hidden. It's starting with the bodies hidden in the ice.
Absolutely.
And it's about your...
it's about what you see, too.
Your masculinity. Does your masculinity come from being
posturing,
tough? Or what Gibbs tells Proby, which is like, you're trying too hard.
Right.
And if you're trying too hard, it's not authentic. And if it's authentic... doesn't have to be, Charles Bronson or Clint Eastwood or Steve McQueen or Mark Harmon. It can be,
all of those men I love very much. Jim,
all right, let's
from
move
Hot
on.
Springs, how did they get the corpse under the ice? That's a really good question.
So I know what they did.
Okay, tell me. If there is such a thing.
They put a tarp down underneath. And if you've ever heard of people putting a skating rink in their backyard,
yeah,
they will put it under, and then there's machines that they use to actually freeze. They filled it with water. They put the bodies in the water, and then they froze things. The corpse that we needed to find into the water. We should have asked Horowitz about this because he would remember production. But I know that it was real ice. And we were standing on real ice.
Oh my
but
God.
The snow
and it was
around,
a night shoot, Cherie. And we got done like around 3 or 4 a.m. because it was a long night shoot.
But all the snow was cotton that they lay around, or foam. They have these foam machines that they shoot giant towers of foam.
Okay, so listen, I have something that I'm going to throw at you because I read this before and I was like, ooh, this is a good one. So Gibbs' rule of the day, rule number 35, always watch the watchers. What do you have to say about that?
I have to say that that's what we're doing right now with this podcast, is we're watching the watchers. We are paying attention to the people who watch. We're watching the watchers. So, this has to do with people return to the scene of a crime that they have committed. So sometimes if you've done something bad, you come and you want to see how everyone's responding to it because you're kind of a little curious and proud of your handiwork. So that's one of the reasons to watch the watchers. What do you think?
Okay, what I understood from it, and this is really funny how we perceive things and we, things land in a different way. I thought always watch the watchers meant watch the ones who are quietly observing. So always watch the quiet ones. Like, to me, it translated to that. I think obviously your take on it is probably more appropriate to the episode we just watched. But for me, I thought, that makes a lot of sense. Like, always watch the ones who are like quietly observing from the background, because I've always felt like the ones who are still and sort of just taking it all in, those are the ones that are really very much aware of what's actually going on. They're the ones who hold the secrets. They're the ones who know, because the ones that are doing all the talking and they're charming all the snakes, they're usually missing. They're not listening, and they're not watching what's around them. No, I mean, I think you and I both love talking, and we both engage. And there are moments that I watch people, and I have a couple of people in my life that are very close to me that are really quiet, and they just sit there and they observe. And then when you get their perspective on things, it is so incredibly refreshing, because all they've done is just kind of made a case study of everyone. And they're like, well, you know, that guy, when he was grabbing it, and I'm like, I'm fascinated by the observations. I'm always like, and you know what? When I was really, really young, I was very much the quiet girl who was always observing. I didn't say a lot. And I think, and it was a really interesting place to be.
By the way, I just want to tell all the people out there in Watcher land, if you want to watch episodes of NCIS, NCIS LA, NCIS Sydney, NCIS New Orleans, or NCIS Hawaii, or NCIS Origins, or the future NCIS Tony and Ziva, you can either put your hands together and just pray really hard that somehow it'll just come to you, or you can go to Paramount Plus and you can watch over 1,000 episodes of this beautiful universe, or you can watch new episodes of NCIS over on CBS. Next week on Off Duty, do you want to read us the thing?
No, you're so good at this.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to try and do it in one breath again. I feel like...
Oh, I love when you do this, because
a Navy lieutenant who was working at the Pentagon's cryptography department is found dead in her home, having apparently committed suicide. It looks like a simple case until Abby discovers that there was someone else in the room with the lieutenant when she died. But who, you may ask? Stick around and find out. It's season 3, episode 20, Untouchable.
Oh my God, you barely had air. Off Duty with Cody DePalma.